Welcome to History, Facts to Fall Asleep To. Tonight we'll drift quietly through the long story of human history, not through battles, noise or heavy details, but through small and gentle moments from the past. We'll visit ancient cities, quiet homes, clever inventions, old roads, bright libraries and distant palaces. History is often told through kings, wars and great changes, but it is also made of ordinary objects, daily routines, soft candlelight, handwritten words, and people simply trying to live their lives. So, settle in, let your thoughts slow down, and imagine the past not as something far away, but as a calm landscape you can wander through. Our first stop is in ancient Egypt, where even sleep had a very different shape. In ancient Egypt, people sometimes used pillows made of stone. These were not pillows in the soft modern sense. They were more like small headrests, shaped to lift the head slightly above the sleeping surface. To us that might sound uncomfortable, but to the Egyptians it had practical uses. It helped keep the head raised, and may have helped keep insects or dust away during the night. These headrests were often smooth, carefully made, and sometimes decorated. It is a simple reminder that even something as ordinary as going to sleep has changed many times across history. The need for rest was the same, but the way people rested was shaped by the world around them. And while we are still beneath the Egyptian sky, it is easy to imagine the Great Pyramid of Giza as it once appeared. Today its surface looks rough and sandy, but when it was first completed, it was covered in smooth white limestone. Under the bright Egyptian sun, the pyramid would have shone across the desert. It must have looked almost like a mountain of light rising from the flat land around it. Over time, much of that outer stone was removed or worn away, leaving the structure we recognize today. But for a moment, picture it as it was thousands of years ago, clean, bright and silent, reflecting sunlight over the Nile Valley. Far away from Egypt, in ancient Mesopotamia, people wrote on clay tablets. Before paper, before notebooks, and long before phones or computers, they pressed symbols into soft clay using a reed stylus. When the clay dried or was baked, the writing could survive for thousands of years. This is why so many messages from Mesopotamia still exist today. Some tablets record laws or trade, while others contain stories, school exercises, and everyday notes. There is something peaceful about that idea. A person made a mark in clay long ago, perhaps during an ordinary working day, and that small mark crossed the centuries to reach us. Mesopotamia was also home to some of the first known cities in the world. Places like Uruk grew into busy centers of farming, trade, temples, and writing. Imagine narrow streets, mud brick buildings, people carrying baskets, merchants weighing goods, and scribes recording information on clay. These cities were not like modern cities with electric lights and traffic, but they had the same feeling of human activity gathered in one place. People came together to build, trade, worship, plan, and create. A city is more than buildings, it is a rhythm, and thousands of years ago, that rhythm was already beginning. Back in Egypt, daily life was not only about monuments and pharaohs. Ancient Egyptians also enjoyed board games. One of the most famous was called Senet, and it was played for thousands of years. The game board had rows of squares, and players moved pieces across it. We do not know every rule exactly, but we know it was popular among many levels of society. Some boards were simple, while others were beautifully made. It is pleasant to imagine families or friends sitting together in the evening, moving pieces across a board, enjoying a quiet game after the work of the day. In the Indus Valley civilization, people built cities with remarkably advanced drainage systems. Some homes had bathrooms connected to covered drains, and streets were planned with care. Cities such as Mohenjo-daro and Harappa show a strong sense of order and practical design. The people who lived there clearly valued cleanliness, planning, and comfort. Much about their writing and culture remains mysterious, but their cities tell us something important. They were thoughtful builders. They understood water, space, and daily convenience in ways that still impress people today. Ancient China gave the world many beautiful and useful things, and one of the most famous was silk. For centuries, silk production was a closely guarded secret. The fabric was soft, light, and strong, and it became highly valued across distant lands. Making silk required careful work, from raising silkworms to weaving the fine threads. Over time, silk traveled along trade routes that connected China with Central Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. A single piece of fabric could carry stories of craft, patience, and long journeys. Even today, silk still feels connected to elegance and quiet skill. One of the most important objects in the study of ancient Egypt is the Rosetta Stone. It helped scholars understand Egyptian hieroglyphs because it contained the same message written in 3 scripts. By comparing the known writing with the unknown, researchers slowly unlocked a language that had been silent for centuries. The Rosetta Stone is not large compared with a pyramid or temple, but its importance is enormous. It reminds us that sometimes a key to the past is not a palace or a treasure, but a written text, waiting patiently for someone to read it again. In ancient Rome, many ordinary people lived in apartment buildings called insulae. These multi-story buildings were common in crowded cities, especially in Rome itself. The lower floors were often more desirable, while the upper floors could be smaller, cheaper, and harder to reach. Life in these buildings would have been busy, with neighbors nearby and street sounds rising from below. It shows that city living, with all its closeness and activity, is not a modern invention. Long ago, people were already climbing stairs, hearing footsteps above them, and living side by side in the heart of a city. Some wealthy Romans enjoyed a comfort that feels surprisingly modern. Heated floors. This system was called a hypocaust. Hot air from a furnace moved through spaces under the floor and sometimes inside the walls, warming rooms from below. It was especially used in bathhouses and villas. Imagine stepping from a cool courtyard into a gently warmed room, the heat rising quietly from the floor. It took engineering, fuel, and labor to make it work, but the idea was simple and comforting. People have always searched for warmth, especially in the colder parts of the year. Roman daily life also included something close to fast food. In busy cities, many people bought ready-made meals from street shops and food stalls. Some homes, especially small apartments, did not have proper kitchens, so prepared food was practical. Archaeologists have found counters with large jars built into them, where food and drink could be served. It is easy to picture someone stopping after work, choosing something warm, and eating while the city moved around them. The details are ancient, but the habit feels familiar. A quick meal on a busy day is a very old human convenience. Moving forward into medieval Europe, people often used herbs to freshen rooms. Lavender, rosemary, mint, and other fragrant plants could be scattered or hung indoors. In a world without modern cleaning products or air fresheners, herbs brought a pleasant scent into homes and halls. They were also linked with ideas of health and comfort. A room with herbs drying near the wall or lying among rushes on the floor may have smelled earthy and calm. Small details like this help us imagine the past not only through sights, but through scent. In many old towns and villages, bells helped structure the day. Church bells or town bells marked the passing hours, called people to prayer, signaled work times, or announced important events. Before most people owned clocks, sound carried time across the community. A bell ringing over rooftops gave people a shared rhythm. Farmers in the fields, workers in shops, and families at home could all hear the same signal. But time was not glowing on a screen or ticking on every wall. It moved through the air, carried by sound. Before electric lights, candles were valuable household items. A good candle could make evening work possible, light a meal, or bring comfort to a dark room, but candles took materials and effort to make, so people used them carefully. Some candles were made from tallow, while more expensive ones used beeswax. The difference in quality could be noticeable, especially in smell and brightness. Imagine a quiet evening long ago, a small flame moving gently in the room, shadows shifting across wooden walls. Light was precious, and darkness was much closer than it is for most people today. Many medieval homes had only one main room. In that single space, people might cook, eat, work, talk, and sleep. Privacy was limited, and daily life was shared closely with family members. A fire might burn in the center or near one wall, giving warmth and a place to prepare food. Tools, bedding, clothing, and supplies were kept nearby. To modern people this may seem crowded, but it also created a strong sense of togetherness. The home was not divided into many specialized rooms. It was one living space, changing purpose throughout the day. Before forks became common in Europe, many people ate with knives, spoons, and their fingers. Forks existed in some places earlier, but they spread slowly and were not always accepted at first. Table manners changed gradually over time, shaped by fashion, culture, and practicality. A medieval meal might involve shared dishes, bread used almost like a plate, and hands cleaned before and after eating. It reminds us that even the simplest habits, like how we bring food to our mouths, have a history. What feels normal today once had to become normal. Salt was one of the most important materials in history. Before refrigeration, it helped preserve food, especially meat and fish. This made it valuable for survival, trade, and travel. Salt could allow people to store food longer and carry supplies across distances. In some places, salt routes became major trade paths, and towns grew around salt production. Today, salt sits quietly on kitchen tables, easy to overlook. But for much of human history, it was a substance of great practical importance. A tiny grain could be part of a much larger story. People in some periods may have slept in two phases, often called first sleep and second sleep. They would rest for several hours, wake during the night for a while, and then return to sleep until morning. During the waking period, people might pray, talk quietly, think, tend the fire, or do small tasks. This pattern reminds us that sleep itself has a history. Modern schedules, artificial lighting, and work routines changed how many people rest, but long ago, the night could have a quiet middle space, a gentle pause between two sleeps. Shoes were not always shaped differently for the left and right foot. In some periods, shoes were made straight, so each one could be worn on either foot. Over time, shaped left and right, shoes became more common, offering better comfort and fit. It is a small change, but a meaningful one. Footwear tells us a lot about technology, fashion, class, and daily movement. Every step through history was taken in something, whether sandals, boots, wooden clogs, or simple leather shoes. Even the shape of a shoe carries traces of the past. Spices were once signs of wealth in many parts of Europe. Cinnamon, cloves, pepper, nutmeg, and other spices travelled long distances from Asia and other regions. Because they were costly and difficult to obtain, using them could show status. Wealthy households added spices to food not only for taste, but also for display. A richly spiced dish told guests that the host had access to rare goods. Today, many spices are affordable and easy to find in shops, but once, a pinch of pepper could represent ships, merchants, markets, and months of travel. One of the great inventions of history was paper, first developed in ancient China. Before paper, people wrote on materials such as bamboo, silk, parchment, clay, or papyrus. Paper made writing lighter, cheaper, and easier to spread. It helped knowledge travel through letters, books, records, and art. The invention seems simple now because paper is so ordinary, but its impact was enormous. A thin sheet could carry a poem, a tax record, a drawing, a map, or a message between friends. Paper quietly helped human memory grow beyond the limits of speech. The compass changed travel forever. By helping people find direction, even when landmarks were hidden, it became especially important for sailors. The compass did not remove all danger from travel, but it gave travelers a new kind of confidence. Across oceans, deserts, and unknown routes, direction mattered deeply. A small magnetic needle could guide ships toward distant harbors and help connect parts of the world that had once felt far apart. There is something almost poetic about it. A tiny object, turning gently, helping people cross wide and uncertain spaces. The wheel was invented long after humans began farming. Early wheels may have first been used for pottery before they became common in transport. This surprises many people because the wheel feels like one of the most basic inventions, but it required the right materials, tools, and need. A wheel is simple in shape, yet powerful in effect. Once combined with axles, carts, and roads, it helped move goods, people, and ideas. History often works this way. An invention may seem obvious after it exists, but before that moment, someone had to imagine it. Glassmaking is thousands of years old. Ancient people created beads, vessels, decorations, and later windows from glass. Early glass objects could be colorful, delicate, and highly valued. Making glass required heat, skill, and knowledge of materials. A small glass bead from the ancient world may not seem impressive beside modern technology, but it carried beauty and craftsmanship. It caught light in a way stone or clay did not. For people long ago, glass must have seemed almost magical, solid, smooth, bright, and sometimes transparent, like frozen water touched by color. The printing press helped books spread across Europe. Before printing, books were copied by hand, which took a great deal of time and labor. Printing made it possible to produce many copies more quickly and consistently. This helped ideas, stories, religious texts, scientific works, and practical knowledge reach more people. The sound of a printing press was not loud compared with modern machines, but historically it echoed far. Each printed page became part of a growing world of shared reading. Knowledge could move faster, and more people could hold it in their hands. The first mechanical clocks appeared in medieval Europe and were often placed in towers. These clocks helped towns measure time more publicly and regularly. Earlier, people relied on the sun, bells, water clocks, or other methods. A tower clock gave a town a visible and audible center of time. People could look up and understand the hour together. Mechanical clocks were not always perfectly accurate by modern standards, but they changed how people organized life. Slowly, time became something measured more precisely, divided into smaller parts, and displayed above the streets. Ancient Greek engineers built automatic devices using steam, water, weights, and simple mechanical principles. Some temple doors could open in surprising ways, and small machines could create effects that amazed visitors. These inventions were not modern machines, but they show curiosity and creativity. People were experimenting with motion, pressure, balance, and illusion long before the industrial age. It is calming to imagine a workshop in the ancient world, filled with tools, sketches, and quiet problem-solving. Human beings have always enjoyed making things move. The abacus was used for calculation long before modern calculators. Different versions appeared in several ancient cultures using beads, stones, or counters to represent numbers. With practice, a person could add, subtract, multiply, and divide quickly. The abacus is a reminder that intelligence is not only found in machines, it is also found in systems, habits, and trained hands. A person moving beads across rods was doing something both practical and elegant. Numbers became physical, something you could see and touch. Roman concrete was incredibly durable. Some Roman buildings, bridges, and harbour structures still survive today because of the strength of their materials and engineering. Roman builders learned how to combine lime, volcanic ash, water, and stones in ways that hardened into long-lasting structures. Their concrete allowed them to build arches, domes, walls, and foundations on a large scale. When we look at old Roman structures, we are not only seeing architecture, we are seeing patience, experiment, and knowledge turned into stone-like permanence. The telescope changed how people saw the sky. When early astronomers looked through it, they discovered details that had been invisible to the naked eye: moons around Jupiter, mountains on the moon, phases of Venus, and countless stars. The universe became larger and more complex. A simple tube with lenses opened a new way of thinking. Imagine standing outside at night, looking upward and realizing that the sky contains far more than anyone had seen before. The telescope did not make the stars brighter, it made human vision deeper. The city of Venice was built on wooden foundations. Wooden piles were driven deep into the soft ground beneath the lagoon, supporting buildings above the water. Over time, under low oxygen conditions, the wood became remarkably stable. Venice grew into a city of canals, bridges, boats, and stone palaces. It is one of history's most unusual urban landscapes. Instead of streets filled mainly with carts or cars, the city moved with water. The foundations hidden below remind us that beauty often depends on quiet structures we rarely see. The Colosseum in Rome could hold tens of thousands of people. It was one of the largest entertainment buildings of the ancient world. Today it stands partly ruined, but still powerful and recognizable. Its arches, corridors, and seating areas show the skill of Roman builders and organizers. While the events held there could be intense, the structure itself tells a broader story about architecture, crowds, and public life. Imagine it in the early morning, empty and still, with sunlight touching the stone. Even a place built for noise can become quiet with time. The Great Wall of China was not one single wall, built all at once. It was a long system of walls, watchtowers, and fortifications built and rebuilt over many centuries. Different dynasties repaired, extended, and changed it depending on their needs. The wall crossed mountains, deserts, and open land. It was not only a physical barrier, but also a symbol of organization, labor, and frontier life. To picture it is to imagine long ridge lines, stone paths, distant towers, and the slow work of generations. High in the Andes Mountains, Machu Picchu was built with remarkable stonework. Many stones fit so closely together that they need no mortar. The city sits among steep green peaks, often surrounded by mist. It was built by the Inca and remains one of the most famous archaeological sites in the world. Its terraces, walls, and pathways seem to follow the mountain rather than fight against it. There is a calmness in that design. The builders worked with the landscape, placing human skill inside a dramatic natural setting. Medieval castles were often built in stages. Some began as wooden forts and later became stone strongholds. Over generations, walls were expanded, towers were added, gates were strengthened, and living spaces became more comfortable. A castle was not always a finished object. It could grow and change with the needs of its owners and the surrounding region. Looking at a castle today, it is easy to imagine it as one complete design, but many were more like layered memories in stone. Each addition marked a different moment in time. The city now called Istanbul has had several names. It was once Byzantium, then Constantinople, and later Istanbul. For centuries it stood at a crossroads between Europe and Asia, connecting trade, culture, religion, and empire. Its position beside the Bosporus made it one of the most important cities in the world. Names changed, rulers changed, and languages changed, but the city remained a meeting place. Some places in history feel like bridges, and Istanbul is one of them. It connects shores, eras, and civilizations. Ancient libraries were centers of knowledge. They collected texts about science, history, law, poetry, religion, medicine, and more. A library was not just a storage room for scrolls or books. It was a place where memory gathered. Scholars copied texts and compared ideas and preserved information for future generations. The famous Library of Alexandria is the best known example, but many cultures valued collections of writing. There is something deeply peaceful about the image of a library in the ancient world. Quiet shelves, careful hands, and words waiting to be read. The Lighthouse of Alexandria was one of the tallest structures of the ancient world. It guided ships safely into the harbour of Alexandria in Egypt. Built on the island of Pharos, it became so famous that the word Pharos came to mean lighthouse in several languages. Its purpose was practical and comforting to help sailors find their way. Imagine a ship approaching the coast at night, watching for the distant light that meant safety, direction, and arrival. Across history, lights have often meant hope, and this was one of the greatest. Roman roads connected a huge empire. Built with layers of materials and careful planning, many roads were designed to be strong, direct, and long-lasting. They allowed soldiers, merchants, officials, messages, and travelers to move more efficiently. Some modern roads still follow similar routes because the Romans chose practical paths through the landscape. A road is a quiet kind of power. It does not move by itself, but it makes movement possible. Every footprint, cartwheel, and hoofbeat adds to its story. Cathedrals in medieval Europe could take generations to build. Some people who worked on them never saw the finished result. Stonecutters, carpenters, glassmakers, sculptors, and labourers all contributed to buildings that rose slowly over decades or even centuries. This required patience on a scale that feels rare today. A cathedral was not only a building, but a long act of community effort. Each stone placed by one generation became part of a structure completed by another. The result was architecture that carried time inside it. One famous way to understand ancient history is through Cleopatra. Cleopatra lived closer in time to the moon landing than to the building of the Great Pyramid of Giza. This fact gently stretches our sense of time. Ancient Egypt lasted for so long that even Cleopatra, whom many people think of as very ancient, came thousands of years after the pyramids were built. History is not a small room, it is a vast landscape, with some ancient things being far older than other ancient things. Many kings and queens had official food tasters. This was partly connected to safety, but also to the formality of royal meals. Royal courts were full of rituals, roles, and carefully managed routines. A meal was not just food. It could be ceremony, politics, hospitality, and display. The presence of a food taster reminds us that power often came with unusual customs. Even eating could become part of a larger system of court life. Ordinary actions were wrapped in ceremony when they happened near a throne. Queen Elizabeth I of England owned many richly decorated dresses. Clothing was a powerful symbol of status, authority, and identity. Her gowns could include fine fabrics, embroidery, jewels, lace, and elaborate shapes. Portraits of Elizabeth often used clothing to communicate strength and majesty. In a world without television or social media, public image still mattered deeply. A ruler's appearance could send a message. The fabrics, colours, and details were not random. They were part of how power was seen. Japanese emperors belonged to one of the world's oldest hereditary monarchies. The imperial line is traditionally traced back many centuries, and it has played an important symbolic role in Japanese history. Over time, the emperor's political power changed, but the institution itself remained deeply significant. Traditions, ceremonies, and continuity became part of its meaning. Some historical institutions survive not because they stay exactly the same, but because they adapt while still carrying memory. The Japanese imperial tradition is one example of history flowing through a long line. Medieval rulers often travelled around their kingdoms. Instead of ruling from one fixed capital all the time, they moved between castles, estates, towns and religious centres. This allowed them to show authority, collect resources, hold court, and manage relationships with local nobles. The travel could be slow, but presence mattered. A ruler arriving with a household, guards, servants, horses, documents, and supplies would be a major event. Power was not only written in laws, it was also seen in movement across the land. Royal seals were used like signatures. A seal pressed into wax showed that a document was official. These seals often carried symbols, coats of arms, or images of the ruler. Because many people could not read, the visual mark of a seal was especially important. It confirmed identity and authority. There is something beautiful about a wax seal. Warm, soft wax pressed by a carved object, cooling into a shape that could carry legal meaning. A small mark could approve a decision, grant land, or send a message across a kingdom. Ancient Persian kings built roads for messengers. The royal road helped information move across the empire more efficiently. Messengers could travel in stages, using stations along the route. This system impressed later writers because of its speed and organization. In a vast empire, communication was essential. Orders, news, and reports had to cross long distances. Before telephones, trains, or the internet, a road and a relay of riders could connect distant places. It was an early network, built from horses, dust, and discipline. The Byzantine Empire preserved many ancient Greek and Roman texts. In its libraries, monasteries, schools, and scriptoria, works of philosophy, literature, science, and history were copied and studied. These texts later influenced learning in Europe and beyond. Preservation is one of the quieter forces in history. It does not always look dramatic, but it matters deeply. A person copying a manuscript by hand might not know how far that work would travel. Yet, because of such careful labour, voices from the ancient world continued to speak. In ancient Egypt, cats were highly respected animals. They helped protect homes and grain stores from pests, which made them valuable in daily life. Over time, cats also became connected with religious symbolism and domestic comfort. Their graceful movements and useful role made them special companions. It is easy to imagine a cat walking silently through an Egyptian home, slipping between baskets, sunlit walls, and stored grain. Across thousands of years, the calm presence of a cat feels familiar. And finally, history is full of ordinary people doing quiet, important work. Farmers planted and harvested, builders lifted stones, scribes copied records, sailors followed winds and stars, cooks prepared meals, parents cared for children, craftspeople shaped wood, metal, cloth, and clay. These people may not always appear in famous stories, but they made the world function. The past was not built only by rulers and inventors. It was carried by countless ordinary lives, each one adding something small and real. As we come to the end of this quiet journey, let the centuries soften in your mind. Think of stone pillows in ancient bedrooms, white pyramids shining in sunlight, clay tablets drying in Mesopotamia, herbs hanging in medieval homes, candles glowing in dark rooms, roads crossing old landscapes, and libraries holding words for the future. History is not only a record of what changed, it is also a reminder of what has stayed the same. People have always needed food, warmth, shelter, stories, rest, beauty, and connection. They looked at the sky, played games, built homes, made tools, cared for animals, and tried to understand their place in the world. And now, as the past grows quiet again, you can let these small facts drift away one by one, like footsteps fading down an old stone road, like candlelight softening at the edge of sleep, like pages closing gently in a quiet library. Thank you for listening to History Facts to Fall Asleep To. Sleep well and let your mind rest softly among the calm corners of the past